Hello everyone and welcome to Winging It, the F1 podcast. This week we'll be focusing on racing restart at the Austrian Grand Prix, the latest news as the sport gears up for lights up this weekend and looking ahead to what this unique season will bring. With me, Adam, are
Nigel
and Freddie.
So I'm Adam Dickinson on Twitter at Adam Dickinson01, and I have been watching F1 since 2007. I write for F1 feeder series covering basically kind of all junior single-seater racing, and also Last Lap Mag or lastlap.co.uk covering F1, and this will be my first season covering F1 week in, week out, which I'm really looking forward to. Freddie?
I'm Freddie Coates. I'm doing Last Lap with Adam as well. I do mostly Formula E. I dip into F1 every now and again when there's a good bit of news if I want to. And I do a bit of feeder series as well when Adam lets me, because I'm sort of getting in through him. And yeah, I can be found on Twitter at Freddie Coates 1999.
Yep, and I'm Nigel. I'm writing for motorsport.radio, been writing with them since the end of 2017, mainly covering Formula 1. I started writing with the checkered flag last year, talking about rallycross. But F1's still my main sport, been watching it since 2007, 2008. And now I get to talk about it with you guys. And my Twitter's at NigelCJournal.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to this. We'll be doing a Austria-specific preview later in the week, but this week we're kind of mainly looking ahead at the season as a whole, what we expect it will bring and what things it could throw up. But we'll start with a piece of news that has come out today from Mercedes, reigning Constructors' Champions, and they have announced that they will be stepping up fight against racism and discrimination in F1. They'll be hoping to increase diversity, and they will be sporting a black-based livery compared to the silver-based liveries that they've had normally in their involvement with the sport. Their drivers will be wearing black overalls and black helmets, or they'll rethink their helmet design to conform with this, and they will be. They've not announced the specifics at the moment, but they've said that they will be launching a program to increase diversity within the sport and their team. So they'll be looking at recruitment and raising awareness within the team, and looking to basically increase representation of personnel in the sport and the team from underrepresented backgrounds. So far, their press release said that 3% of their workforce identify as from a minority ethnic group, and 12% of their employees are women. So they're kind of taking a direct approach to updating the sport in what I think is the least diverse mainstream sport in the world. Freddie, what did you make of this when you saw it?
Oh, yeah, well, I completely agree with you that motorsport as a whole, not just Formula One, is just not diverse at all. It's a white male sport completely. And the fact that Mercedes has come out brilliantly with this and has just gone the whole hog by turning their car just black, just with M racism written on the halo, it's fantastic. It's carrying on the debate for the whole of the 2020 season at least, which is, it's not a debate. It's just an education for people. It's carrying that over, that everything that's been going on since the end of May across the world is not going to die down, and it shouldn't. Mercedes is saying this should not die down. We completely support Black Lives Matter, everything, and they're going to push out there with their diversity program, and that's just perfect. The perfect move from the world champions.
Echo that, Nigel. What did you make of it?
Yeah, Mercedes setting the example once again. It'll be interesting to see if other teams follow the suit, not necessarily with the livery, but to increase diversity, as Freddie talked about. The car looks good as well. We're so used to the silver arrows, but with the Renault, that that they have a black livery this year. In the past, we've seen Minardi, Lotus. So it's not the first time we've seen a black livery. And yeah, it's just great to see them do this. And unfortunately, it has received a lot of criticism and backlash from some people, which is just completely outrageous, really. And yeah, but Mercedes are doing the right thing with this.
Yeah, I think Renault will be kicking themselves that they moved on from their testing livery. This could have been perfect to go on to this. But yeah, I think what Lewis said, that it's important that they seize this moment to create real meaningful change. And he said he's experienced racism in his life and seen his family and friends experience the same, which kind of coming from one of the most famous sports people in the world, a 6-time world champion, really kind of hits home. And I think what he's been doing across a lot of lockdown with his stuff on social media about speaking out and his experiences, and also going to a Black Lives Matter protest is a really kind of meaningful statement from him. Do you think it can kind of produce real long-lasting change, especially because he's coming to the end of his career and there's not another ethnic minority driver, kind of on the verge of F1 so
far? For me, I think what Hamilton's done is definitely a great thing, and it's just unfortunate in a way that it was him who had to initiate what Formula 1 support for Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. Whether it's going to change in the future, we're only going to see a difference in 10, 15 years' time. It's not going to happen overnight. But yeah, I hope there is change. I think there will be, because as the generations go on, people will become more educated. They will know more about the racism that is going on in the world currently. And it's good to see that Hamilton has been very supportive and speaking out about this.
Yeah, Lewis he's really made a culture of forward thinking possible in Formula One. You saw that without him calling out other high up figures in the sport for not openly supporting the Black Lives Matter movements on their massive social media platforms, he called them out straight away. The majority of drivers who were on social media just went straight out and echoed what he was saying and said they didn't feel comfortable talking about it. And he's made them comfortable to discuss these situations. He's made Formula One a progressive sport, and he's been so influential in that. And the fact that everyone's willing to go with him is brilliant.
And I think we've seen at Mercedes, he's been big on kind of reducing their environmental footprint. So he said that he's kind of spoke to team members about not using single-use plastics, and they've really cut down on that kind of in, not just on their car side, but, in their kind of catering and all of that. So there's been change there. And I think, if anyone can do it, he can. And I think props to Mercedes and Toto Wolff for supporting that, definitely. And it'll be, I think they'll get a lot of success in the Black Arrows this year. But I think off the track, that will, any wins or championships they get will pale in comparison to if they can create meaningful change. So, really good luck to them with that.
And off the track, what they've got, they announced in end of February, early March, before the pandemic and everything, as their Formula E season was taking off, they announced their aims to essentially have a carbon neutral Formula One team. And that's fantastic. Every racetrack, their plan was for all of the team transport to be electric vehicles. And at testing, they had Mercedes EQ cars there and everything. And the only petrol run situation for Mercedes is the Formula One car. And that's still that still is probably the most efficient power unit, apart from an electric power unit, in the world. And that's no mean feat for Mercedes. They're pushing forward in every element of the sport, and there's a reason they're 6 on the trot with constructors and drivers championships.
So moving on to where we will see the Black Arrow or Black Arrows on track this season, there's been discussion about what the calendar will bring. At the moment, it's confirmed up until Monza, but after that, there's been no official statements. I think there were rumours that it would come out today, but that's not happened, possibly because of the Mercedes news. But Nigel, what do you think the calendar is looking like for the remainder of the season?
Yeah, I think it's pretty certain that Mugello will be on the calendar. It will take place after Monza, and then it looks like there's going to be a 2-week break until the next race, which will be in Sochi. If Russia, the coronavirus doesn't improve there, Hockenheim is ready to step in, and then Portugal's Portimao will follow after that. Now, following the Portugal race in October, there's a bit more uncertainty, really, because does F1 want to take the risk by going to North America? Can they host multiple races in Canada and USA? Because there's not really much point going to just USA and just having one race there, because another factor that F1 has to think about is that shipping costs have rose significantly during the pandemic, which is why we're seeing this European central-based calendar. And the season, I think we can almost be sure of, will finish with Abu Dhabi and Bahrain before that as well. We expect that to be a double header, the Bahrain events. But yeah, does F1 want to take that risk by going by having fly away races?
Freddie, do you think they'll take that risk?
It's still being discussed, isn't it? And obviously the situation in America is a bit dire, frankly, if you're looking at it from our perspective. Canada is a bit better, but as Nigel says, you can't really rely on Canada in the same way that you can't, because you can't rely on America. So obviously Montreal would need a lot of notice as well. It's not a permanent facility. There are permanent facilities across Canada, but if you're going to go to a deepest, darkest depths of Canada, you may as well go to some tracks in Europe, because going out there and then traveling all the way across Canada, because Montreal at least is on the East Coast. Mexico and Brazil are looking very unlikely as well. Bolsonaro has just not left Brazil in the best state, at risk of getting too political with this, but politics isn't sport anyway. And Mexico want to sell tickets. Mexico think they're in a good position, but you can't rely on Montreal and Mexico only, because you've got to then traverse all the way around the world for 2 races.
Yeah.
I guess looking at it, I guess F1 does travel to Canada for one race. Normally, they go to Canada from Europe and then back to Europe the next week or the next race. So I think, if there is a Canadian and Mexican Grand Prix, that could work. Montreal's not far from the US border as well, so there could be a bit of a Grand Prix of the Americas, not in name but in kind of stature for this season.
It's not far from Watkins Glen, which is in New York State, I'm pretty sure, and Montreal down to upstate New York is pretty feasible, frankly.
Yeah.
I don't know Watkins Glen's grade situation.
No, I don't know about that, but I think it could. I'd like to see it, because I'd like to see it as a kind of international season rather than just Europe and the Middle East largely. I guess the other thing is it's not going to be kind of set in stone until potentially kind of August, maybe even into September.
But that's going to be a problem though, because the teams need to know how the engines, how the gearboxes they can use. So surely we should hear something this week, because how would they know how hard to push the engines in the first few races if they don't know how many races they're expected to be? So we should hear something this week, or else we're going to be in a weird situation where we don't know how many races there will be, how many points are going to be up for grabs.
It's definitely a case of watch this space. What did you make of what are you making of the tracks that have been added in? First, you, Nigel.
Yeah, I think Mugello and Portimao F1 have never been there, so I think it's always exciting when you get 2 brand new tracks. So I think it's going to be great, really. And looking at the potential tracks that are going to be left in the season, a lot of them tend to favour Ferrari, which is a bit unusual. If you look, you got Hockenheim, Sochi, 2 races in Austria, possibly 2 races in Bahrain, and last year Ferrari were very good at those tracks. So make of that what you will. But yeah, it's almost a better calendar than what it will normally be. We've got so many races packed together, and going to new tracks is a great thing. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the calendar that looks like will be rolled out soon.
Yeah, following on from that, I think Mugello and Portimao are both cracking tracks. Mugello is just the back part of Mugello is just speed. It's ridiculous, the high speed corners they've got there, and then coming out from a really long, fast back corner into the main straight, and then a really fast turn one, pretty fast for a turn one. I think it would be a really, really interesting, experiment just to see Formula One there. And similar with Portimao, that's also fast. It's a similar shape to sort of, you get like a Catalunya and an Estoril. They've got a similar kind of double horseshoe perspective to them, and everyone who's gone to Portimao that I've seen really likes it. And if there's tracks that they're enjoying driving, then presumably that's for a reason.
Yeah, I think neither of them look like tracks that will produce incredible racing in terms of wheel-to-wheel overtaking. As you both said, they're very fast tracks, which is great on the eye in terms of seeing the cars flowing through, and obviously great for the drivers. But I think the flip side of that is there won't be too many overtaking zones, there won't be too much kind of trading places. It might be more based on strategy and kind of race pace, in terms of how much you can push the car when you've got clean air. So I think, it might detract from that. But on the flip side, as much races as we can get this season, considering it's shortened, will be, we've got to welcome that. And also, this is probably the time to test that out. We've got a kind of unique situation, and I think a bit like with the reverse grid races qualifying proposals, I think now is kind of the time to try that out and see how it will work. Nigel said that he thinks it will favour Ferrari, perhaps with the all-out speed. Freddie, have you got a opinion on that?
I was quietly thinking that the other day as well. You look at Ferrari. Charles Leclerc got the most pole positions in 2019, and one of those was at Austria. One of his first pole position was at Bahrain, and that's
Belgium,
Italy, of course. Yeah. 2 wins. So if the Ferrari has got an inherent speed advantage on straights that it had last year, obviously there's a big caveat to that based on the FIA fuel burning calamity, pretty much, from the start of the year. So we need to see how Ferrari stack up, but based on 2019, it's very Ferrari heavy. I'm a bit surprised that there hasn't been any talk about Paul Ricard, because I know it's not a fan favourite track based on the 2 races that have been there and the iridescent eye display you get. But France have lifted lockdown, and if you look at it from a political perspective, France is probably one of the better countries to go to, and it's got the contractual obligation of contractual situation for a Grand Prix. So I'm a bit surprised that Paul Ricard hasn't been touted. I think there might just be a common sense aspect to that of let's go crazy with it. Why not? But
yeah, well, following on from that, kind of looking ahead to the season, it's hard. We don't even know which race the drivers' champion will be crowned in. But who do you, or what are your opinions on who do you think will take the World Drivers' Champion for 2020? Freddie, what do you think?
It's hard to look past the reigning world champion, isn't it? Lewis Hamilton's he's a man possessed when he gets behind a race car, and he's been on a roll for the past however many seasons. And if his 2019 walkover is anything to go by, 2020 is in the bag already. If Bottas can really sustain, then there's a fight there. If Verstappen can get involved, depending on the developments Honda have made, because Honda, they're not bad. I mean, Pierre Gasly out-dragged Lewis Hamilton to the finish line in Interlagos with a Honda engine. That's not to be sniffed at. Depending on where Honda are, you could potentially have Max Verstappen in the mix. But you can't look past Lewis Hamilton. I mean, yeah, Lewis Hamilton. I've said it. Yeah, cool.
So Nigel, after we spent kind of 4 or 5 minutes talking about how it's a Ferrari heavy calendar, are you going to follow Freddie's? Are you going to follow Freddie's lead on that?
Yeah, well, I think the calendar favouring Ferrari. It might bring them back into play a bit, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to challenge for the title unless they've done something miraculous behind the scenes in the last few months. But because I think they would have struggled this year if it had been a normal season. But the new tracks might help them. But in terms of who's going to win the title, I think Hamilton has to be the favourite. But I do think Red Bull and Verstappen have a better chance, have a good chance compared to previous years. I know Honda have been working very hard behind the scenes. They've invested a lot of money into the new power units now, and ultimately, Mercedes, how long can they sustain this success? Can they keep going? They are the team to beat, but they'll have to be beaten one day. So Red Bull and Verstappen might just be the package that does that.
What about you, Adam?
I think I'm going to be boring as well. I think it will. I'm not sure how much it will kind of rest on, obviously, the cars and what the teams produce, but also how the drivers have reacted to a long break. You know, Lando Norris was saying it's been the longest break he's had since he started karting. So I think there's an element of that even though he's not been big on the sim racing stuff, I think Lewis is the driver with the best kind of headspace and the best mastery of his emotions and mental states, which I think will really benefit him kind of partly going into the unknown, but also having a longer layoff than usual. So I think there's that aspect. Also, you know, I'm not sure Ferrari have got the fastest car, and with the FIA ruling on their engine last year, I think, you know, a decent amount of the advantage they did have could have been wiped out. It's difficult, obviously, to know everything from testing, but to me, I think Mercedes are the best. They've got Hamilton, who I think is the best driver. They're the best team at winning races, even if they're not outright the fastest car. They're still good at kind of working it and getting the setup and the strategy right and winning. So yeah, I think I'm going to go for Hamilton as the drivers' championship and Bottas second to really drive the nail in the coffin. Verstappen will be in and around.
I would say, though, the shortened season, Hamilton has started a few seasons off, 2018, 2017, a bit slowly. Bottas has started off well. With 8 races in the first 10 weeks, if Hamilton has a DNF in the first or second race, it will put a lot of pressure, and it will be a new thing for him because he's so used to leading the way. And with Red Bull, 2 races in Austria and then Hungary to follow, that's 3 great opportunities for them. So if Verstappen could be in the lead of the championship after 3 races, then it could be all to play for, and it could put Hamilton and Mercedes under pressure. And there's been 4 or 5 months since testing now. So
yeah.
We're going to see almost new cars because the teams are going to bring so many upgrades. So if Mercedes haven't quite got it right and Red Bull have got it right with the upgrades, it could be a very important factor as to how the championship plays out. So I wouldn't put. So yeah, I think Hamilton's the favourite, but I don't think he's going to have it all his own way.
And also, I think on that, with the shortened season, how early will the teams want to be calling in team orders? Because if Bottas can get off to a good start, like last season, I think Mercedes were pretty reluctant to use team orders while they were still both in firmly in the championship fight. So I think that there's that aspect as well, but that's, I guess, mirrored with Albon, maybe not to the same degree. On that subject, the Constructors' Championship, what are your thoughts on that? I'm just going to lay my cards on the table now. I think I've backed Mercedes to be 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship, so that would mean they also take the Constructors' crown. Is anyone got an argument against that?
I don't really. I think Mercedes, they are, they're we've lauded Mercedes this entire podcast. You can't, you can't go against that, I think.
Yeah, I think it's only Red Bull who have a chance if they come up with a world-beating car. We still don't know much about Albon. He was okay at the back end of last season with Red Bull. Still an unknown. If he can step it up a few levels, he might be. If he needs to really get in there and do what Bottas is doing and be the perfect number 2, but it is hard to get to bet against Mercedes. Well, we just don't know because, like we said, there's been 4 or 5 months since testing, so the pecking order might have changed. Something
about Albon was that you kind of look at Red Bull in testing; they're spinning a lot, and there's 2 sides to that. Does that mean that they're both finding the car a little bit twitchy, a little bit hard to drive, or does that mean they're feeling really comfortable in the car and Verstappen and Albon are both pushing? And based on the confidence that seemed to air around Red Bull, particularly how keen they were to race in Melbourne, I think they've got a car that underneath both drivers has a lot of drivability, and they've got a lot of confidence in their package. I think Red Bull, as a car, to mix it with Mercedes is definitely, as Nigel says, one to watch. I think Red Bull also, one thing I'm quite interested in, to see how competitive they're going to be immediately, because they were apparently all set to lodge a formal complaint pretty much against Mercedes DAS steering situation. So whether they're going to go straight in on Friday morning in Austria and protest the Mercedes car as well, I think Red Bull have got a lot of storylines surrounding them.
What a story that would be for the first, what a statement that would be as your first act of the season. So far we've only talked about Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari being in the mix at the top. So for the best of the rest, Class B, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, firstly, do you think there will be a Class B? Do you still think it will be the top 3 teams running away with it and kind of on paper the 3 fastest cars at most races, or do you think maybe there'll be a bit more of a mix-up, there'll be a bit more of a blurring of the lines between the kind of podium positions and top 5 positions and lower down? Nigel?
I think for me, the Renault, Racing Point and McLaren, I think they will close in. They might halve the gap from whatever it was last year. Who's going to be the team to beat out of Renault, McLaren and Racing Point it's hard to say, because I think they were pretty close in testing. Racing Point, the pink Mercedes, as everyone's calling it, will be very interesting to watch. The only thing that might let Racing Point down could be the drivers, because if you look at Stroll and Perez versus Renault's Ricciardo and Ocon, you have to say that Renault's driver lineup is much better, and that could be the difference, really. The drivers could make a massive difference in the midfield this year.
I'm very excited to see the Ocon-Ricciardo pairing. I think that's going to be brilliant, especially with Ricciardo's move to McLaren coming into it. But if you do the cardinal sin of looking over drivers' performances in other seasons, in 2018, Ocon pretty much put Perez to shade. And I think that's a lot to say about the driver skill coming into that Renault lineup. Ricciardo, proven race winner. Ocon, just sort of the dark horse of the young guns of Formula One, I think. And if Racing Point can get in front, it'll be hard for Renault to get past, because they'll be pretty much matching. It'll be like Williams and Force India were in 2016, I think, where they were neck and neck for the constructors for 4th place all the way up until Brazil or Abu Dhabi of that year. So I think it's going to be very close with those teams, and McLaren as well, obviously, in the fight. Sainz has got got such momentum in his career now, and he's going to be on fire confidence wise.
Yeah, I do. I think it's going to be a very interesting Class B battle. I do still think it will be. I can't see. I mean, I know Racing Point put in a very strong performance at testing, but I think I still can't see them challenging any of the top three teams on a regular basis. I think from testing, I'd say maybe Ferrari are the team most likely to slip back a bit in certain races into that battle. Of those, I think I might cop out a bit. I don't think there's going to be a consistent winner out of it. I think it'll be just kind of based on random factors in the race, reliability, strategy. But I think if you put a gun to my head and said I had to pick a team that would be fourth in the Constructors' Championship, I think I'd actually go for McLaren, because I think if you look at their reliability last season wasn't the best, especially with Norris, and obviously he was a rookie and will have learnt a lot from that season. And I think they've got, considering how close the battle was last season, I think they've got the highest ceiling out of the teams. And I think, obviously Racing Point, it's a bit hard to get a reading in a sense into their testing performance, whether they can carry that through, especially considering the long layoff. And Renault, I'm just not sure everything's right at that team, kind of with Ricciardo leaving or on his way out, and there's clearly some bad blood there between the two parties. So I think, to win the midfield, you'll have to have everything going for you. I'm not sure Renault have that. I'd also throw AlphaTauri in, because they had quietly good testing, and I think Gasly is fast in the car. He didn't do well at Red Bull, but I do think he's a very fast midfield driver in the right setup, and he's got that. And they got 2 podiums last season, and I think they're a tidy team that are able to take advantage of those chances. You see that, and obviously it's over a decade ago, but Vettel's win, I think they've got the know-how to take advantage of those promising positions. Who do you think, Freddie, will be your surprise of the year?
I don't really... Well, it's a really tough one, that. I think Giovinazzi, if we take it down to Alfa Romeo, I think back end of last year, well, around sort of Silverstone, Austria, he was on pace in 2019 with Raikkonen, and then he seemed to step up a level after the summer break and was really coming on song. So I think Giovinazzi is one to watch, and I think he could really put Raikkonen to shade if he really cements his little mistakes that he seems to have. He seems to have something, just one little thing just sort of moves him out of the points. And whether it be a spin or whether it be a crash in Spa, there seems to be just one little thing that's done by Giovinazzi that sets him back. So I think if he wipes that out, he could be a midfield surprise of the season.
Yeah, for me, I think it has to be Sergio Perez. I think he can get 1 or 2 podiums perhaps this season if Racing Point have got the car to be close to the front three. And there's bound to be a race where Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes make mistakes and they slip up. And Perez in the past has been the person to get onto the podium and take advantage of that. He's done that when he joined F1 with Sauber. He did it with Force India. He's done it a couple of times at Baku as well with Racing Point. So, yeah, I think Perez for me is the driver to watch.
Adam, who's your midfield surprise?
I think AlphaTauri is. I think they'll surprise people, and especially Gasly. I think he's got to set his stall out, because he's not, considering how he failed at Red Bull, I'm not sure he's going to be in the Red Bull system forever. So I think he's really got an incentive to try and set his stall out to any of the potential suitors who want him in his team. And I do think he'd be an asset to a lot of teams on the grid. It's just unfortunate that the one that, or one of the few that he hasn't improved, is Red Bull. I also think going a bit further up the grid that Vettel will have a bit of a resurgence this year, because I think out of, obviously all drivers are affected, but he seems to be especially affected by external factors or kind of form driving. But I think once the pressure's off of, he knows he's not racing for a seat, he just has to go out and give his best each week. And if it doesn't work out, then he can go home at the end of the day, and it's not going to affect his future drastically. I think he could be a surprise package and pick up some wins and take it to Leclerc more than Ferrari. What do you guys think on that?
That's interesting. I think Leclerc's only going to get better though. Vettel's got a lot to prove. Yes, he showed. I do think Vettel had a better season than many people like to suggest last year, because his race pace was in general slightly better than Leclerc. In qualifying, Leclerc was arguably slightly better, but I don't know. I don't think Vettel and Ferrari have. It was meant to be the match made in heaven, but it's not really happened. Really, it hasn't. Yeah, I think Vettel might struggle again, and I just hope he can stay in 2021.
Well, Freddie, Rob Smedley said that 2019 was Vettel's best year in F1. So do you think, based off that analysis, which I think I probably wouldn't agree with, but do you think he'll go one better in 2020?
I think the 2019 best season in F1 kind of things, you look at Vettel's poor seasons in F1, and 2014 in Red Bull, when Ricciardo came in, Ricciardo whitewashed him and Vettel was out of the team. 2019, Vettel, at least he's got the 2020 season there, and now he's out. But in 2019, he picked himself up a bit more with the young hotshot that he didn't do when he was at Red Bull in 2014 against Ricciardo. So I think there's been growth there. I think I agree with you. I don't think it's his best season for obvious reasons. He seemed a bit slack in his racecraft, for instance, and a lot of things were left to be desired, like some race pace. He was way off on his tyres compared to Leclerc in Spa, for instance. But he picked himself up, and he was better in going through the traffic in his racecraft at Singapore, which handed him the win there, prevented the team orders from coming to play. He took the lead in Sochi and stayed there. And he got pole in Suzuka. He out-qualified Leclerc a few more times to the rest of the season. So he picked himself back up. And that's easy to overlook. I think it's a really tough one to call. I do agree with Nigel that Leclerc's only going to get better. The chains are off for Vettel now. He doesn't have to. He's not to the whim of his bosses, because he's out. So
yeah,
might be a few more bastard multi-21 moments from Vettel, and I think I like to see that from him.
We're coming up to the end, but there's a couple more that I'd just like to get your first thoughts on. Firstly, just one word answer: will everyone score a point this season? Will each driver score a point? Obviously, that didn't happen last season, as George Russell didn't and Kubica scored one. But Freddie, yes or no?
Yes, at least 2 points.
Nigel?
No, Latifi. He'll let us all down.
Oh no, Latifi! I want him to do well.
And transfer market. If there was going to be one mid-season transfer, who will it be?
Oh, I don't think there will be one, personally.
The what if is like, yeah, let's go crazy with it. But I agree with Nigel. I don't think there will be one. I think there is. If there is one, it would be for Kvyat from someone from Formula 2. Robert Schwartzman's going to drive for AlphaTauri.
Interesting.
I'd go set a camera for Kvyat, but I would just point. I can't remember who suggested that as one of the predictions, but they've left me high and dry there. So coming to the end of the podcast now, it's been a very enjoyable experience. I hope you'll agree, and those listening at home will also agree. We will be doing another one later in the week on the Austrian Grand Prix, looking ahead to that, who we think or what we think the storylines are going to be there. And personally, I'm just really happy to see racing back in live action. Have you got anything to add?
Who's going to be Roman Grosjean's replacement at the end of the year? Nigel, go.
Schumacher if he performs in F2. That's my answer.
Adam, go.
That's interesting. I've just said Schwartzman, but to be honest, I don't really know. That was the first name that came into my head.
Well, no, Schwartzman's going to AlphaTauri. We've already established that.
It could be Jack Aitken if Williams don't pick him up, but that can be something we can look ahead to next time if we want, or have a bit of a look at the F2 grid and what's going to happen there. But for now, thank you all for listening. Thank you, Freddie and Nigel, and we will see you next time.